ELA. And we are reading in ELA the Constitutional Convention. And you may be wondering, gee, why is Mr. Gately wearing a Super Bowl shirt? Well, that's because this is Super Bowl 52. That's because it's Super Bowl on Sunday, right? Wrong. Okay, so what we're doing is we're dealing with the Philadelphia thing. That's why I wore that. And that's why I wore this. Because the Constitutional Convention was in Philadelphia. Just like the Declaration of Independence. That's where everybody met. It was the capital of the United States for a while. I know New York City was for the first year, but then they made Philly. And then they moved it to D.C. So right now, we're going to be studying the Constitutional Convention. And we're going to go over some words and terms about the convention. It's kind of neat that we can do this in English class because this is an English book because we're studying it in history class. So it's a nice tie-in that we get to do it in both classes. Okay, so let's read on, shall we? Let's read on some glossary terms first. Glossary. All right, I'll do it the way I always do it. You ready? Okay. Amendments. Formal changes to a bill or constitution. Compromise. A settlement of differences in which each side gives in on certain parts. Congress. The national lawmaking body of the United States, consisting of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Constitution. The written document describing the basic laws and ideas governing the United States. Delegates. People authorized to represent others, as at a convention. Executive. A person or group responsible for managing an organization. Here, the branch of government charged with putting the country's laws into effect. Federal. A form of government in which states are united under a certain authority or power. Judicial. Relating to courts of law. Legislative. Having the power to create laws. Philosopher. A person who takes a calm and reasonable approach to life. Rebellion. An organized uprising against a government. Representatives. Everybody. People acting for others. All right. Those are your terms. Now let's read about the Constitutional Convention by Judith K. Miller. Introduction. On May 25th, 1787, guards stood watch in front of the Pennsylvania State House. They were keeping people from entering the building. The brick street outside was covered with dirt. This reduced the sound of passing carriages. Inside, some of the most famous Americans were deep in thought. 4 months later, their work was finished. They had created a government plan that would unite the independent states of America for more than 200 years. Chapter 1. The Delegates. The Constitutional Convention was supposed to begin on May 14, 1787. However, most delegates, or people sent to represent their state, were not there yet. Travel across the states was so difficult. 11 days later, on May 25th, the convention finally began. 55 delegates from all but one state attended. Rhode Island had refused to take part in the convention. Robert Morris of Pennsylvania began the meeting. He wanted George Washington to lead the convention. Everyone agreed, and Washington was elected. The delegates thought that having the famous general run the meeting would make it seem more important. Franklin, Hamilton, and Madison. At 81 years old, Benjamin Franklin, who represented Pennsylvania, was the oldest delegate. Many people called Franklin the wisest man in America. He had worked for independence and had signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Franklin was one of the most respected men in the young nation. Europeans said Franklin was the only American philosopher. Alexander Hamilton was a delegate from New York. He had served with George Washington in the Revolutionary War. Hamilton thought the independent states needed a strong central government. 2 years later, President Washington would appoint him as the new nation's first Secretary of the Treasury. In his job as Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton fixed the nation's troubled finances. He encouraged manufacturing and planned a national bank. He helped the country become a powerful industrial nation. James Madison. James Madison. James Madison was a delegate from Virginia. He became known as the master builder of the Constitution. Just like on Lego, right? Lego World. He's the master builder. The Lego movie, right? That's what we're talking about. Okay. Yeah. He helped organize the Constitutional Convention. He also suggested many of the ideas used in the Constitution. Madison believed in a federal government, or a government in which states are united under one system of laws. He said that a federal government could control trade and protect people's rights. Chapter 2. Why were they meeting? Why were they meeting? Sorry. The years between the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the writing of the Constitution have been hard for the people of the American states because of the Revolutionary War. Britain refused to trade with Americans. The United States had a national or central government, but it was too weak to keep order. Each state made its own laws. Some states put taxes on goods coming from other states. Some states refused to pay back the money they owed from the Revolutionary War. The differences in state laws caused problems between states. Each state printed its own money. Often this money was worthless in other states. Farmers had the most difficult time. The money they received for their crops usually had little value. Shays Rebellion. Daniel Shays was a farmer in Massachusetts. He had been a soldier in the Revolutionary War. In the days leading up to the Constitutional Convention, Shays organized farmers who were losing their land. In January 1787, Shays and his followers marched to Springfield, Massachusetts. They wanted weapons stored there. Massachusetts troops had to stop them because the national government could not raise an army. The rebellion. We'll stop your rebellion. The rebellion or uprising ended. Yet many people feared there would be more uprisings. And so that happened right here in western Massachusetts. What happened was the farmers couldn't pay their taxes because they got a lot of their money in like either whiskey or other farming goods, and they couldn't give the banks money to keep their land because they didn't have money. They were bartering. So it was really a silly system, and Boston wasn't really listening to them and to make it work it out. So the rebellion, after a few deaths and minor skirmishes, it did end finally. So, all right, now back to the story. Time for change. The need for a stronger central government was now clear. However, many people did not want a federal government. They thought it would make the states weaker. They did not want a central government telling the states what they could and could not do. They thought this would be as bad as being ruled by the British. Patrick Henry was a former governor of Virginia. He had been a leader during the American Revolution. He had said, "Give me liberty, or give me death." Henry did not go to the Constitutional Convention. He did not want Virginia to accept a strong national government. Actually, what he also said about this convention, he said, "I smell a rat." Chapter 3, Writing the Constitution. Writing the Constitution was not easy. Everyone had different ideas about how a federal government should work. They disagreed about how many representatives each state should have in Congress, the national legislative or lawmaking body. States with a lot of people wanted the number of representatives to be based on population. States with small populations wanted every state to have the same number of representatives. Making compromises. Delegates argued for days. I'd say months and weeks, frankly. Finally, Roger Sherman, a delegate from Connecticut, had an idea. He said that the U.S. Congress could be made up of 2 legislative groups. In one group, every state would have the same number of representatives. In the other group, number of representatives would be based on the population of the states. The delegates set up 2 houses of Congress. In the Senate, each state would have 2 representatives. In the House of Representatives, the number of representatives for each state would be based on its population. The idea was accepted. It became known as the Great Compromise. Woo! Yeah, it is. It's known as the Great Compromise. Delegates made other compromises, too. Many felt the Constitution must guarantee liberty or freedom for everyone, including enslaved people. Southern states believed that their economies depended on slavery. They said they would leave the convention if the Constitution outlawed slavery. The other states did not want the delegates to leave, so they agreed that slavery would be an issue for another time. Some delegates did not want a strong central government. They feared that having a president would give one leader too much power, like a king. Or emperor! Ha 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 ha! Okay, alright. That was... Delegates wanted to prevent this. The 3 branches of government: executive, president; legislative, that's Congress; judicial is the Supreme Court; checks and balances. Delegates decided on a system of checks and balances. They agreed that the government would be divided into 3 parts or branches. Each branch would have its own power. Each branch would also be able to check the power of the other branches. This way, no branch would become too strong. Power would be evenly balanced. Each branch had different powers. The president heads the executive branch. The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president can make treaties or agreements with other countries. The president appoints Supreme Court justices and can veto or reject bills passed by Congress. Congress is the legislative branch. Congress has 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Together, the 2 houses write bills, which they hope will become laws. So I'm just a bill and I'm sitting there. All right, we'll watch that later. Congress can charge a president with wrongdoing. That sounds familiar. That's last few years. The former President Trump was twice accused of wrongdoing, charged with it. The Senate also approves the president's appointments to the Supreme Court. The judicial branch is the court system. Some courts decide punishment for people who break the law. Other courts settle disagreements. The highest court is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court. It decides if laws are constitutional. This means the Supreme Court can decide whether laws are allowed by the Constitution. The Supreme Court often makes the final ruling about issues that affect the United States. I like the Supremes. Diana Ross Dawson.
Supreme.
That's right. Supreme Court. The Constitution becomes law. On September 17th, 1787, the delegates signed the Constitution. It had been a long summer, and the delegates returned home. Now they had to encourage states to accept the bold new plan. Some Americans thought the Constitution took too much power away from the states. Others wanted the Constitution to list the rights and freedoms of people in a Bill of Rights. However, they knew that amendments or future changes could be made to the Constitution. Amendments could address these concerns. In the end, all of the states accepted the document. A Bill of Rights was promised, and the Constitution was finally enforced by the end of June 1788. Delegates had formed the foundation of the government the United States still has today. Okay, so, and again, they promised that Bill of Rights, and they really made a good one. I wouldn't have trusted them. Again, people don't like to give up power, and that's what that Bill of Rights does. It did. They did a great job. Gotta give them a lot of credit for that. And I gotta give a lot of credit for the Supreme Court. All right, so remember, the Constitutional Convention was in Philadelphia. Okay, the Eagles and the Phillies, right? Philadelphia. That's where it was held, and they helped make our government that we still use today. All right. Hope you have fun this week, and have fun at the Super Bowl where the Eagles will play the Patriots, right, Connor?
Yeah.
Who's playing this year?
Kansas City against Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
All right, so that's Mahomes versus Brady, right?
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes versus Tom Patriot Brady. All right. All right, well, I hope you guys have fun. We'll see you.